Hello YouTube. I really like flags, so I thought today I could talk a bit about flags. The technical term for the study of flags is vexillology. So this will be a video on vexillology, and we're going to look at some of the basic principles of flag design. I'll just say, before starting that for those of you who use the website Reddit has a fantastic forum on vexillology. So go and check that out. Go and check out Reddit's Vexillology forum. It's a lot of fun there. You might see me there. I post there as Amplified Cactus. So if you see somebody called Amplified Cactus there, that'll be me. Anyway, for those unfamiliar with vexillology, there was a famous pamphlet released by NAVA, the North American Vexillological Association, called Good Flag, Bad Flag. And this expressed what they took to be the 5 basic principles of flag design. Now, these shouldn't be seen as being absolute and inviolable. They are just rules of thumb. Flag design is an art form, so you can't limit it by any absolute rules. And as we go through this, I will talk about some of the exceptions to them. So first of all, this first rule: keep it simple. The motto that's often used here is that a flag should be simple enough that a child can draw it from memory. Why should flags be simple? Well, because you want a design that is memorable, like immediately memorable, and also relatively easy to reproduce. If people can reproduce a flag easily, they're more likely to use it. Furthermore, and this is, I think, the key point, is a flag will be seen from a distance, often flapping in the wind. Right, so you've got to think about how is this flag going to appear if you're looking at it from far away, when it's flapping in the breeze, or when it's hanging down, if it's limp, when it's not windy. This is one reason why what's known as the canton of a flag is quite an important spot. That's the top part of the flag closest to the flag pole. That's because symbols that are placed in the canton can still be seen even when the flag is hanging limp. So you'll often notice that many flags place important symbols in this top left part, or rather top part closest to the flagpole. So you've got to think about this. You've got to think about what's it going to look like from the distance, flapping in the wind. Also, what's it going to look like seen from the opposite side? And that's why simplicity tends to be favoured. Even very simple flags can be really quite striking and notable. I mean, here we've got on the left a Japanese flag, very, very simple but immediately recognisable. Then there's the flag of Amsterdam, just a brilliant, striking, eye-catching design. Here are a couple of others: the flag of Trinidad and Tobago and the flag of the Bahamas. Again, very simple designs. Now contrast this with a few more complex flags. I mean, it's just a mess, these flags. There are interesting ideas in them. This flag here for Sydney, Australia on the left, it actually sort of looks like a combination of 4 different flags, all of them just all jumbled together. With the Navajo Nation one, I mean, what's going on there is that looks like they've got 4 mountains, a rainbow, they've got that symbol in the middle, they've got what looks like a map of the US, all sorts of stuff going on there. It's just going to look like a complete mess if you see it from a distance, if you see it flapping in the wind. There are more intermediate cases, I suppose. On the left here is the flag of Turkmenistan. The overall design of this is quite simple. You've just got the band, and then you've got the moon and the stars. But if you look at this band, there's all sorts of stuff going on in it. This is actually supposed to look like a carpet, because it symbolises the country's carpet industry. The creation of carpets and rugs has apparently for long been an important thing for Turkmenistan, and it has these 5 different designs for the 5 main tribes of Turkmenistan, but it is just hopelessly complex. However, there are some cases where complexity works quite well. These are the flags of Wales and Maryland, the US state Maryland. Absolutely gorgeous flags, both of them. But both pretty complex. Why does it work here? Well, if you look at the Welsh flag, I think the overall structure is actually quite simple, because you've got the white bar, the green bar, and then this red dragon. Now the lines on the dragon drawing make it quite complex, but if you just look at the dragon almost as like a silhouette, it kind of comes across as much more simple. So it has more simplicity in the overall design structure. On the other hand, with Maryland, the somewhat unusual colours used and the repetitive design make it instantly recognisable, and the overall composition has a nice sort of balance to it. So yeah, Maryland, one of the best state flags. Maryland, most US state flags are absolute rubbish. I mean, they really do scrape the bottom of the barrel with a lot of the US state flags, but Maryland is just a beautiful flag. Okay, so second, use meaningful symbolism. I would say this is pretty obvious. All the elements of a flag have to mean something. The shapes, the colours, and any emblems you put on. You don't want to waste space. I think that's probably, I mean, of all of the principles of flag design, I think this one is basically the only one that really can never be violated. So maybe it's worth saying a little bit more about this. I think that a key point here is that you really should focus on symbolism and avoid realistic imagery. So for example, some flags include realistic maps. Most notably, for instance, the flags of Kosovo and of Cyprus are two national flags which have maps on. And on the right here we have this awful Dallas flag, which was replaced in 1967. It actually shows the location of Dallas within Texas, so it's literally a map. Now, I mean, I suppose this really connects to the previous point about keeping it simple. Maps are very complex. At least if you have a realistic map, you're going to have all of the jagged lines of the borders of the country. And I think as well, it's just sort of lazy. I mean, the point of a flag is to symbolise your country or your state or city or whatever it is. You don't just want to have a picture of it, right? You want to symbolise it. A map is just not a very creative way of symbolising an area. Having said that, if the map is highly stylised, it can work very well. So this flag of St. Louis, Missouri represents the confluence of the Missouri and Mississippi rivers. So that's essentially that's a map, but it's very, very stylised, very, very abstract. And so you just have a pleasing image that symbolises these rivers. Or the flag of Kagoshima in Japan. The Kagoshima is split into two parts. There's a large part connected to the rest of Japan, and there's a smaller island. And in this flag, the black represents the land part, whereas the red circle represents the island. Obviously, Kagoshima doesn't actually look anything like this, but this is a very, very abstract, very stylised map, which produces a very pleasing symbol for the flag. Some other examples of realistic imagery that doesn't really work. This flag of Louisiana, a fairly realistic depiction of the bird and its chicks. Mexico is even worse. I mean, actually it's quite small, so maybe you can't see it very well, but there's quite a realistic image of a bird on there. A more stylized bird is going to look better on a flag. This flag of Tierra del Fuego in Argentina, that represents an albatross. The white line down the middle, that's an albatross, but it's very, very stylized, very abstract, and it's incorporated very well into the overall visual design. So again, this is really just a part of the keep it simple rule. You want to use meaningful symbolism, but avoid making it too realistic. It should be abstract, it should be fairly stylized. So the third principle is use 2 to 3 basic colours. So the idea here is to limit the number of colours and choose from the standard colour set, red, blue, green, yellow, black and white. Now actually I have to say I just disagree with this one. Again, what this comes down to is another way of saying to keep it simple. You don't want to pack loads and loads of colours in your flag, otherwise it's going to become very, very complex. But I don't think you need to use 2 to 3 colours. I don't think they have to be basic colours. There are many flags showing more colours that really work beautifully. So The flag of Namibia, the flag of Antigua and Barbuda both have 5 colours. But I think you'll agree they're actually quite simple designs, and they're both very striking designs as well. And as for the basic colours, well, using more unusual colours can help make the flag more distinctive. The problem with using more unusual colours is getting the fabric. Apparently a lot of places that print flags are not so likely to use colours like pinks and purples and oranges, but assuming you can get the flag printed, and I suppose with modern techniques it's probably a lot easier nowadays to get these more unusual colours, it can look quite nice. I would say that the more important point when it comes to colour is to bear in mind contrast. So in general, you want to put dark colours next to light colours. You don't want to have light colours next to light colours or dark colours next to dark colours. This derives from the rule of tincture from heraldry, but it's just generally a good design principle. Compare the flag of Iceland to the flag of the Faroe Islands. The flag of Iceland, it's visually very pleasing. The colours work, it's nicely balanced. The Faroe Islands, it sort of hurts your eyes in a way. I mean, maybe not hurts your eyes, but it just looks funny. The red and the blue, they clash. Or similarly, look at these flags. So the flag of Macedonia, strong, striking colours. On the other hand, Arizona, I mean, it's a good design idea, but I think it's just completely ruined by the failure to pay attention to contrast. I mean, what were they thinking with this flag? That just ugly brownish orange star in the middle there. It just doesn't work at all. You should bear in mind contrast. Another thing to bear in mind is avoid gradients. Gradients simply don't translate very well to flags due to limitations of printing and sewing. I mean, flags are made from cloth, remember. Now actually, if you're just doing flags online, gradients can look pretty cool. So on the left here, this is a random flag that I designed that contains a gradient. Looks very nice on a computer screen. Also, this version of the Greenland flag by somebody on Reddit. Actually, that looks really beautiful. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful flag. But if you were to print it and have it as an actual flag flying, it would look pretty terrible. So, no gradients, sadly. Okay, the fourth principle is no lettering or seals or coats of arms. Seals are extremely complex. They have letters, they have detailed imagery, they have many colours. They're designed to be seen at close range, and they are a disaster on flags. That's the main problem with many of the US state flags. Vexillologists call them seals on bed sheets. And it's a weird combination of both incredibly complex and also really boring. I mean, the designs, as you can see, of the seals are really, really complex. But all the flags viewed from a distance just sort of look the same. And, I mean, these are just a few American state flags. If you look at the American state flags, many of them have this design. You just take a blue background, whack a seal on it. It looks terrible. I'm not sure I've ever seen a flag where a seal actually works. I mean, maybe the flag of Wyoming. What's interesting about this flag is that the use of the state seal on the buffalo is supposed to evoke the branding of cattle, which is an important part of the culture of Wyoming. So yeah, I suppose I can see that works. I don't know though. I think it looks better without the seal. But if you absolutely must use a seal, use it in an interesting way like the designers of the Wyoming flag did. As for lettering, lettering tends to be frowned upon because, well, first of all, because it can't be read in reverse. Remember, you're going to see a flag from both sides, and it's also very hard to read in the breeze if the flag's flapping in the wind. Also, when places put the name of the place on the flag, that kind of defeats the purpose of the flag. I mean, a flag is supposed to be a visual image that symbolises a place. So the place it represents should be should be in the image, right? It shouldn't just be written on the flag. Lettering is just lazy. You know, this Guam flag just says Guam. I mean, Guam is what the flag is supposed to represent. If it successfully represents Guam, why would you write Guam on it? So generally, lettering is frowned upon. Some people are pretty strict about lettering. They hate any kind of lettering on flags. I actually don't necessarily mind lettering, I have to say. I think that there are many flags with words on them that, to my mind, look pretty damn good. I think the key is you want the words to work well with the overall visual design, and you don't want to put on redundant words, basically, like in Guam and Oakland, just the name of the place. That's completely redundant because the flag already represents the place. But lettering may express more general ideas associated with an area, or it may arise out of a particular design tradition. It may have some important or general symbolic meaning. So the flags of Saudi Arabia and Iran are good examples of this. The lettering on these flags arises out of the tradition of Islamic calligraphy. Calligraphy is one of the primary forms of art in the Islamic world because it's strongly tied to the Quran, which holds the written text as being of very great significance. And furthermore, many Islamic cultures have been quite suspicious of figurative art. It's sort of seen as a kind of idolatry. So calligraphy became a really central, a really important artistic tradition in many Islamic cultures. So it's not surprising that calligraphy made its way onto Islamic flags. I think the flag of Saudi Arabia, even with that very complex lettering, the lettering appears almost like a kind of block. And so it actually overall has a very simple structure as a whole. You've got this block with a sword below it. As for Iran, notice that the lettering here is incorporated in quite a creative way. I mean, it's really distinguishes it from a standard tricolour. A standard tricolour would just have the line of green, line of white, line of red, and then maybe a symbol in the middle. But by putting those sort of that white lettering on the edges, really kind of makes it stand out and makes it a bit more distinctive. Similarly, the trigrams of the South Korean flag are derived from the I Ching, which is a very important text in Asian cultures, and you can see that they're just beautifully integrated into the overall design. If you take out those trigrams, you've basically got, well, a play on the Japanese flag, right? I mean, it wouldn't look all that original, but with those black shapes, no other national flag has black shapes organised quite like that. So it looks wonderful there. Also, text might have important political or cultural meaning. The flag of California, again, one of my all-time favourite flags. I love this flag. And the words California Republic, it doesn't say California, right? It's not just naming the place. The word republic evokes the time during which California attempted to form an independent state. It was a very brief time in California's history, but an important part of it. So, the key here in this flag is it's not California, but the California Republic. And that evokes a whole load of history and culture. Okay, the final rule, be distinctive or be related. Don't simply copy other flags. Try to find a design that stands out. I mean, there's nothing quite like the UK flag, for example. That's very, very distinctive, immediately recognisable, and yet you can still sort of see the other flags on which it's based. So, although you want your flag to be distinctive, you can also use similarities to show connections. For example, African flags often use similar colours, green, red and gold. These are the Pan-African colours. The Central African Republic combines the Pan-African colours with the French tricolour in a really beautiful way. So we have the blue and white of France and then the green and gold of Africa with this red vertical stripe showing the unity between them. A lot of people actually find this design too complex, but I think it's wonderful, although maybe they could lose the star. But I think that way of combining the tricolours is just brilliant. Really beautiful visually and kind of carries a lot of meaning. The worst failure of distinctiveness in my view is simply putting a flag within a flag, as you see in Australia's flag and the historical flag of Canada. To me, it just looks very ugly and derivative. I mean, maybe this can work if the flag that you're copying is very simple. Like maybe if you had a simple tricolour flag, or even a bicolour like Poland's flag or whatever, maybe you could then integrate it into a flag in a way that would look good. But you know, taking something like the UK flag and just making it smaller and whacking it in your flag, I mean, it just looks very ugly to me. And also, it's fundamentally lazy. I mean, it's like in the case of Australia and Canada, it's like this is your country. It's a whole country. I mean, give it its own symbolism, you know. So thankfully, Canada changed theirs, but Australia still has that monstrosity. Distinctiveness, I think, is pretty important. A lot of people like the French tricolour, and when it was originally proposed, it must have been a very striking design. These days, I have to say, I find tricolours just boring. There are far too many of them. So you know, I don't blame France. I'm sure when the French flag was first proposed, it must have looked very striking. But these days, I have to say, tricolours bore me. The key, I would say, is to make an interesting flag. I would say it's much better to have a flag that's bad in an interesting way than one that merely follows the rules acceptably. And actually, this, I suppose, suggests a sixth rule, perhaps the most important one, which is that, of course, there are no rules. I've tried to make it clear as we've gone through this video that all of the principles we've looked at have exceptions. And, you know, it's important to bear in mind that these principles were proposed in a particular social context with its own particular tradition of flag design. And any design tradition is going to become tired and boring when too many people follow it. So here are just a bunch of flags that I think would be seen as really exemplifying the 5 rules that we've looked at. And I mean, they are indeed all, in my opinion, very, very good flags. I think they're all very memorable, they're successful, they work really well. Here are a few more flags that exemplify the rules. Again, very good flags. But my point is, if all flags look like this, if all flags follow this pattern, it would start to get boring, it would start to get samey. And that's one reason why we shouldn't treat these rules as being set in stone. When we all follow the same rules, flags that break the rules are going to start to look a lot more appealing. So those were the 5 principles of flag design that, if you're at all interested in vexillology, I'm sure you'll see people talk about quite often. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching.